Hey everybody, welcome to Monday. This is going to be a tough one. Yes, I'm continuing with Last of Us 2 stuff. I hear your feedback that some of you are divided, some of you love this content, and some of you would like to move on. This one is more of an internet culture thing that spun off from a story involving Laura Bailey and a tweet she put out about some of the junk she's getting on the internet because people don't like Abby. I will attempt to balance. I am going to continue with Last of Us 2 content because it's popular and clicks of the game on YouTube, but I'm also aware that some people would like to get back to sort of the cross-cultural content. So I'm going to try to do both. Split it up during a given week. And I am still working on boss fight. Sparing the boss fight updates here because a lot of people who are here now don't care about boss fight. They don't know about it. They want Last of Us 2 content. So if you want the boss fight updates, patrons get very in-depth boss fight updates. So if you care very much about that, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. And I apologize if I cough. During this, I am still struggling with allergies. I recorded a song over the weekend with allergies, singing in 2 different vocal ranges. That was a challenge. And yes, that was for boss fight. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about a tweet and the ensuing media frenzy that Laura Bailey, who is the voice of Abby in Last of Us 2, posted. So she put up, man, I try to only post positive stuff on here, but sometimes this just gets a little overwhelming. I blacked out some of the words because, spoilers. Side note, thank you to all the people sending me positive messages to balance it out. It means more than I can say. And she posted some nastiness that people put. Some of them were outright like, I'm gonna kill you. 2 of them. The others, the one I can see her, and I find it, this one's gotta be a troll, right? I don't know if you can see this. It's actually an Ellie icon from the game that's putting a pretty nasty thread out there. I'm not gonna read it. Well, maybe I should. YouTube might demonetize it. So this is the problem with talking about this stuff. I have to talk about it and still avoid YouTube rules. But I can see how when no one should ever drag children into anything. Never, ever. It's wrong. Not even trolling. Like, true trolls, I know some of them, they have their own sort of inner logic and inner morality, and it's sometimes difficult to understand as somebody who's like, if you're somebody who's not really big into internet culture, but kids are always a no-go. So that I think everybody realizes, yeah, that was over the line. There's also sort of a general consensus on the internet and life, quite frankly, that you should die and I'm going to kill you are not what the latter is a threat. The other is just somebody not good at expressing their anger. So if there's a good side to this, it means there's a lot of very angry people. Very few are truly going over the line. I find it interesting that some of these look like DMs to me, not tweets. Or maybe they're Facebook messages. I don't know. But God, my DMs are locked to people I don't follow for a reason. I don't know why anybody would have open DMs in this day and age. But I don't know. I'm not going to judge that. It clearly rattled her. It does. I want to come at this from a very human place to begin before I get too logical. Because I think it is important to really this is one of these tough things about internet trolling. My theory about those things is that these are trolls. Um because actual gamers, most of them I know, take this stuff very, very, very seriously. They are not happy with the way gaming is depicted. Some of them do go too far. Of late, I have had people come at me pretty abusively. I could, I don't have kids, so, but on any given month, I could go through the responses I get and pick out, 6 or so that fall into this category. Um, it's become white noise at this point, and that's really unfortunate. On the one hand, I don't get very much of it because I don't talk about it, because I don't show it. I learned a long time ago that this is this performative ritual on the internet. If you squawk at this stuff, people will continue to bombard you with it because they know it gets to you. Is this fair? No, you're expecting people to be superhumanly, preternaturally, emotionally strong. But that's the game, for lack of a better term. Those are the rules. The more you complain about something, the more people will try to use it as a way to irritate you, get under your skin, frighten you, etc., because there's this particular perceived ethical framework on the internet that if you are that much of an open victim, you deserve it to an extent. I don't agree with that. I'm explaining the rationale behind how some people justify their trolling in this regard. You know, this makes everybody look bad. And that's why I'm very hesitant to believe that these are people who sort of self-identify as gamers and don't self-identify as trolls, because gamers want this stuff to stop. For many reasons, one of which, in the case of this game, is that stuff like this distracts from criticism they believe to be legitimate and deserving of a hearing. More on that in a bit. Like I said, I'm trying to be very sensitive to this because I understand it is scary if you're not used to it. I'm a bit surprised that Laura Bailey hasn't gotten shit like this in the past. I would have thought people would be more angry about her, and none of this is her fault. This is all stuff Neil Druckmann's doing. My understanding is Nadine Ross started off as a white character and he decided to make her black and muscular midway. But that's not Laura Bailey's fault. So I'm surprised. I think that if that game had come out today in the climate we're in now, it would have been received very differently. I think it's a big indication of so-called progressive left-wing hypocrisy in gaming that game is allowed to skate on those terms by people who have hashtag BLM in their Twitter accounts. Like there are just, you don't get to be part of a movement without understanding the philosophy behind the movement. And the problem with a lot of so-called progressiveness in gaming and tech as well is it wants all the credit for progressiveness while only providing lip service to progressiveness and not truly engaging in things that actually generate progress. And I say this as somebody who cares very much about progress. There's too much bullshit in the world. There are legitimate grievances in a lot of places, and people shouldn't be told to get in line and wait your turn just because the world is so effed up that for whatever reason the powers that be think that only sort of one group of people is allowed to count at a time. Or a handful of people are allowed to count at a time. That's just wrong-headed. That's not what any progressive ideology says. But then you get narcissism and solipsistic thinking, solipsism for people who were like, what? It basically means it's a logical limitation that basically means my mind, the way I think, is the only one that exists. It is people who cannot conceive of or treat as valid other methods of thought, other perspectives on the world. And there's a huge amount of that in so-called progressive circles in gaming because they are overwhelmingly white. They are still profoundly male-dominated, and you see that in the discourse. And one of the ways you see that in the discourse is Neil Druckmann has been taking crap for this game for months now. I have seen very similar things regarding crap he's gotten on social media. I've seen it firsthand, reading the responses to some of the admittedly narcissistic things he's put up. It's not news until it happens to a woman. And that's a problem because, first of all, it's making us targets. And also, when you go, I don't need that kind of help, thank you very much, you're ostracized. Guys get offended. There's, unfortunately, sorry, I have a hair in my eye. There's this nerd guy need to be useful that rears its ugly head in gaming. And it's more, it becomes a bigger problem in progressive circles because it's so contradictory. And that is where you get women who are less traditional, like me, butting up against men who think they're progressive. And some women who think they're progressive, but they actually have very regressive views of who's allowed to do what. And they're the ones that get their backs up worst of all because the benevolent sexism kicks in when you're not the right kind of victim, when you don't fit into that helpless, whimpering female archetype that makes them comfortable, they get super nasty. And I have had a ton of bad experiences in that regard in gaming. Now, again, it is nowhere near as bad as the outright hostile sexism I have experienced outside of gaming. And there's been some hostile sexism within gaming. But again, I separate the wailing of the faceless masses on social media and stuff that happens face to face and among actual colleagues, right? But the problem is that every time something like that happens, a bunch of guys in gaming use these stories to kind of virtue signal and show that they are good allies. But in fact, they don't understand this easy to not understand concept of allyship. And what they end up doing is they end up making this bad stuff that happened to this woman who just voiced a character that was polarizing into something about them. And it's all about showing that they care very much about this issue. And women like Laura Bailey, Antonita Sarkeesian, and Zoe Quinn, and, Amy Hennig, although she kind of resisted by going, no, I'm not playing this game. But um, these women become props in the stories that male commentators and male game developers are telling about themselves. And that's a very unpopular view I have, let me tell you. I don't make any friends pointing this out because it stings. And if you look at these articles, and they're well-meaning articles, because a lot of these male allies do not understand how these things work. They mean well, but they don't actually see structurally what they're doing. So let's start with Dr. Uckman himself. If people wonder what Dr. Uckman is, there's a character in The Last of Us 2 named Dr. Uckman, and there's these weird semi-autobiographical details about people who like used to work at Naughty Dog and stuff like that. It's the collectible cards in the game. But it almost looks like Neil Druckmann took like the comic book series he developed when he was like 11 years old and put it in the game. And if that's all it was, it'd be kind of adorable if it's sort of a nod to the fact that it's awful, but I don't quite know, what it is otherwise. But he retweeted the Laura Bailey tweet, which is how I saw it. Somebody sent me it because I don't have a lot of time to actually read Twitter. But look at the construction of this, okay? As the people that propagate this kind of hate would say, how stunning and brave. Okay, that stopped me up, but I'll read the whole thing and then I'll explain why I kind of got confused by that, okay? As the people that propagate this kind of hate would say, how stunning and brave. I hope these gamers get the mental help they so clearly need. Unfortunately, this is now the cost of making popular entertainment that challenges conventions. Laura doesn't deserve any of this heart. Now, who developed the character that challenged popular conventions? Neil Druckmann and team did. Laura Bailey didn't, right? So he is turning this into an attack on his creation instead of what I suspect it is, which is trolling female voice actors in progressive circles to see if they can get somebody to start screaming. But let's break this down, okay? As the people that propagate this kind of hate would say, do you notice he doesn't define what he means by that in the first sentence? How stunning and brave. Now, I couldn't figure out what he meant with this because stunning and brave was what transgender advocates referred to Caitlyn Jenner as before they got mocked for it and it became like a South Park meme. So I don't know who he's referring to here because the original Stunning and Brave contingent were pro-trans people. So that's first confusing. But then he goes, I hope these gamers get the mental help they so clearly need. He can't know whether these people self-identify as gamers or not. A lot of people who play The Last of Us 2 do not self-identify as gamers. Now, okay, there's like I think that's like a Dishonored character or something like that. That might be Corvo from Dishonored. I'm not sure. But I mean, the worst threat came from somebody with an Ellie icon. It's Ellie's face, right? It's the freaking box art. So you don't have to be a gamer to play games. So to assume that this is somebody who self-identifies as a gamer and not somebody who was really passionate about the Last of Us IP and got really, really mad, I mean, that's a huge assumption that says a lot about how Neil Druckmann himself feels about the core consumers of video games, which is a problem in its own right. But, also, I hope these gamers get the mental help they so clearly need. Confusing crisis and ongoing mental health condition. Being very angry does not make you mentally ill. I need to say this because otherwise mentally healthy people have moments where they just lose their shit. This does not make them mentally ill. For all they know that somebody is going through a really bad time. More on that in a bit. But then the crux, unfortunately, this is now the cost of making popular entertainment that challenges conventions. Where does he get that from? I'm going to disprove this statement that this is the cost of making popular entertainment that challenges conventions. Because it's not about that, and I have proof. This is about making populist entertainment that a lot of people consume on an emotional level instead of on a thoughtful level. Because the first time I encountered this kind of fan hate was with soap opera performers that I interviewed. Some of the first Hollywood celebrities, current Hollywood celebrities that would say yes to a Canadian TV crew wanting to interview them were soap actors, because they don't get a lot of attention outside of like the soap opera digest circle. And they all have their death threat stories. Actors from The Young and the Restless talked about getting smacked in supermarkets. These are men, okay? Especially the long time ones that, you know, they had a heel turn during the storyline, and everybody was really mad because, you know, Victor was treating Nikki bad again and all that stuff. I think those are the names. It's been a while since I watched. But this is the case of anything with a really rabid fandom. And so you'll see there's a whole thing. Eugene from The Walking Dead got it. After he defects to Negan's side, spoilers, sorry. He got, look, Josh McDermott, the actor who plays Eugene, had to entirely remove himself from social media due to multiple death threats and torrents of abuse directed against him. So not exclusive to gamers. Evidence 1. Bronn from Game of Thrones. He wounded Drogon the dragon and almost killed Daenerys, right? He said his postman won't speak to him about that. A guy who knows him in real life, who delivers his mail every day, can't tell the difference between a fictional character and the actor who plays them. Okay? Oliver Queen on Arrow. It says he found himself in a real-life dangerous situation with an enraged fan. He was approached by a fan who abruptly headbutted him and stated that he wanted to defeat the Arrow in a fight. This has nothing to do with defying social conventions. Arrow is something of a frivolous, or it was something of a frivolous TV property. That doesn't mean it's bad. That doesn't mean you shouldn't like it. It just was. It wasn't world-changing. It wasn't a paradigm shift in any way. And he said that he was able to calm things down by talking with the fan and stepping away from the confrontation, and it seems likely that this was just a simple case of an overexcited fan who wanted to act tough. Stephen Amell gets it, okay? Skylar White, this one got really bad, and Anna Gunn ended up doing a New York Times piece discussing the issue. Now, I really think that in the Breaking Bad, I had issues with Breaking Bad, and the Breaking Bad comparison is an apt one because it directly connects to what's happening with Abby, okay? The work of Breaking Bad sets up Skylar as an antagonist to Walter White. And so protagonist bias dictates that the antagonist to the protagonist will be loathed. Because it wasn't one of the more nuanced characters, like, say, Gus Fring, that sometimes helps, sometimes. Skylar was just set up structurally by the story as an antagonist. And people behaved accordingly. And that is exactly the structure of Abby with The Last of Us 2. She is set up deliberately as an antagonist, and predictable results happen when you use that structure. And to complain that people did things that are predictable is lacking self-awareness, it totally unaccountable, and quite frankly, false victimhood. There is enough. If Neil Druckmann and company are playing with structures and are playing deliberately to provoke an emotional reaction, a strong emotional reaction, without really understanding the predictable consequences of that, they bear some responsibility for what happens, not because people's behavior was right, but because people's behavior was predictable. We have examples of this. I'll go on. Here we go. Soap actors. A crazed fan broke into the actor who plays John Black on Days of Our Lives, broke into his house and assaulted him and his wife. Gamers seem pretty chill compared to soap fans, right? Actress from Power, she's calculated, Instagram, social media abuse, again, not super serious. The kid from The Twilight Zone, Bill Mummy. A mentally disturbed fan approached Mummy at a convention many years later and demanded that Mummy transport him the way his character in The Twilight Zone did. When Mummy, I think it's Mummy, I'm sorry, tried to ignore him, the guy proceeded to strangle Bill Mummy, who was fortunately rescued before any serious damage was done. And then we get into Coronation Street actors who've been placed in a headlock. It goes on and on and on and on and on. People being accosted on the street and hurling abuse at him while he was accompanied by his 2 young children. EastEnders actors, another Coronation Street. Like, do you sort of see and then we get into Game of Thrones again. Cersei Lannister, get this. She went out to buy Lena Headey, who plays Cersei, very well, went out to buy a table, and a guy called her a bitch. And just generally finds herself in situations where she feels as though people forget that she isn't an utterly ruthless, incestuous queen of a fictional kingdom that is constantly in a state of conflict. And the article goes on to say, which is odd when judging by her interviews and media appearances, she's actually a rather fun, quiet lady. And it's true. Lena Headey seems awesome in real life. But Mr. Brody on Coronation Street, and then the Green Ranger. Okay? The Green Ranger, this I remember when this happened at the time and people were like freaked out, and a disturbed fan who claimed to be the Punisher was caught sneaking weapons into the building at the Phoenix Comic-Con, and he was out to kill police officers, and Jason David Frank, who played the Green Ranger, this very quick synopsis of people who have trouble distinguishing fantasy from reality, confuse actors for the people they play, just shows that in any group large enough, you are going to get some people who are mentally disturbed. They are not indicative of the larger group. And calling out gamers the way Neil Druckmann did, all that does is create an increasingly antagonistic relationship with a portion of your fan base, considering a lot of reviewers very much like the game, and you're practically guaranteeing that the people who work for you are going to incur more hostility, because don't forget, we live in an age where people think it's okay to expect actresses who need work to boycott things like Woody Allen films because of his personal bad behavior. We are in an age where the behavior of the leader trickles down and has a bad impact on the people they employ, the people they cast. And because of this, true progressive leaders recognize that their own behavior matters. That if you decide to fight with people on the internet and pull this "I'm just brilliant and you don't get it" stuff, you are causing grief for every person whose name is on that property. Especially the people who played the main characters, especially people who played the villains, who played the antagonists, who do those things that were what he calls it, popular entertainment that challenges conventions. And I admit I've yet to see that. The devices, the villain who isn't really that bad a guy. Terran Logain and Dragon Age, anybody? Like, that's been done, right? Like, humanizing the villain. A2 in Nier? Where is the defiance of conventions? What I see is that there's a difference between challenging a convention and using a convention to get a cheap emotional shock. And Neil Druckmann is confusing one for the other. Because there are plenty of people in gaming who do things they know are going to upset people. Neil Druckmann admits that he took a page out of Hideo Kojima's book with the marketing. How can you be challenging conventions when you're copying what other developers, what other artists did before? You can't create and copy at the same time. Something, in order to challenge a convention, must be a new idea. And since Abby is basically Skylar White, spoiler, with a golf club, how you figure, right? Like, it's this grandiosity, it's this pomposity that I think are driving people just into a lather because he's not letting the work speak for himself. And anyone who's watching this who considers themselves a male ally, you're probably not listening right now because a lot of y'all can't stand to listen to a woman talk for more half an hour without an interruption. Just saying, kind of a cheap shot, but based in truth. But any of you who are still listening, if you really are allies to women, and if you really want this crap to stop jumping on board. Support people like Laura Bailey privately. Let her speak for herself. Let her get the support from her fan base. And do not perpetuate the cycle by stepping in and using it to promote your personal view. Don't make it about you. Don't make it about you, because then that just solidifies the idea in the minds of people who are perpetuating the exact same benevolent sexism that you are. And by you, I don't mean everybody. I'm talking to these male feminist allies out here that do that crap. And I know a lot of you who watch my stuff don't label yourselves that way. But this benevolent sexism of here is the larger point that I am going to make, instead of letting women like Laura Bailey define their own experience for themselves in their own words from their own mouths or keyboards. Thank you very much. But all you are doing is perpetuating the idea that these female voice actors attached to great men, TM, are just extensions of that whole. That the entity that really matters is Dr. Uckman, great man, and all the secondary characters are just weak points in the final boss that you shoot at like a Capcom monster. Like, the minute Druckmann tweeted that drivel, Laura Bailey ceased to exist as an individual with a personhood and a soul, and now she's about the cause. Bullshit. It's about people not being able to tell the difference between a fictional character and the actor who played them, and not recognizing that there are very serious consequences for voice actors turning down work. If you're offered something, most people just take it. They know it's crap sometimes. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes a project you're really excited about, it just doesn't come together. It happens. It's a risk every time you do something like this. But it's not their fault. And people taking it too far, it's not a political thing. And it's not, as I think I've shown, it's not specific to gamers or anybody else. Everyone from HBO viewers to Coronation Street viewers to Power Rangers fans is capable of this. And most people, to be clear, aren't capable of this. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny sliver of the fan base that even thinks this is a defensible idea in the first place. But again, I think in the case of Laura Bailey, I really think it actually is trolls. Because that's the thing that makes the most sense. I have not seen Even people who are foaming at the mouth, enraged by this game. I don't see them. I don't see them targeting the actors involved, except for, say, Troy Baker, who made very specific comments, and he's being criticized for the comments he made as Troy Baker, not the character, not the comments he made as a character, or not things he did as a character. That's a little different. But there are plenty of people that are ragingly angry about this game that don't go there. So calling out gamers, that's only going to make things worse. That's making it into something it's not, because obviously Neil Druckmann has something personally invested in this culture war. And perhaps it is because he makes games that are more like interactive movies that appeal more to sort of the secondary casual player base, and not so much the core gaming demographic who, is aware enough of Metal Gear Solid to prefer Metal Gear Solid. Maybe just saying, maybe he's playing a numbers game and trying to appeal to that secondary thing by attacking kind of the core consumer. But I don't know. I mean, most of those people, they're waiting for Death Stranding to come out on PC because they're not console gamers anyway. So I'll wrap here. I am going to sort of get into the legitimate criticism thing tomorrow, because I think it's a fair point and I just didn't have time to address it here. Too much stuff. So I'm going to wrap for now. Another very long video, but thanks for sticking through. A lot of you guys stick through to the end. I'm really impressed. These are long and you're hanging in there. Maybe you're just listening to it while you do other things, which is totally cool. I appreciate it. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.